I thought she was straight, until the hotel had only one bed. One bed between us. Chapter 1. The elevator died between floors with a judder that felt personal. Ellen braced a palm on the mirrored wall and swore under her breath. Across from her, Tia steadied the stack of event totes in her arms and lifted an eyebrow that was probably registered as a deadly weapon in 3 states. So that's a no on the graceful arrival? We are not stuck, Ellen said, stabbing the door open button like it owed her money. The door stayed shut. The emergency light flickered on, turning the little brass box into a submarine. Somewhere above them, the storm bullied Chicago's April sky and spat rain down the face of the glass atrium. Tia blew a curl off her forehead. We are absolutely stuck. There had been 3 warning signs Ellen ignored today: the way Tia had smiled at her in the registration line like they were old conspirators, the way Ellen's pulse had decided to attempt parkour at the same time, and the hotel clerk's apologetic sentence that started with "we're overbooked" and ended with "there's only one room left." Then came the details: queen bed, city view, non-refundable. Of course the conference comp system had paired them. Of course she had nodded and said, "No problem, we'll manage." Tia balanced the totes on a hip and pressed the help button. "Hi, yes, this is Elevator B. We're stuck between 8 and 9 with," she glanced at Ellen, "one very determined optimist and 27 tote bags." A voice crackled, soothingly bored. "Maintenance is on their way. Storm's tripping breakers. Sit tight." Ellen sat. Tia slid down beside her, shoulder to shoulder, their knees a narrow geography in the emergency light. In the silence, Ellen could hear her own heartbeat and the monsoon rattling the shaft. "So." Tia angled her face toward her, that eyebrow again. "Ellen Fitzgerald, Director of Programming. Last year you reinvented the author track with those roundtable salons and made 3 romance novelists cry, in a good way." A grin tugged the corner of her mouth. "I did my homework." Ellen Fitzgerald, who is extremely professional and does not get stuck in elevators, Ellen said. "And you're Tia Morales, logistics wrangler, vendor whisperer, and the only person brave enough to tell a best-selling thriller writer he cannot hang a fake bloody banner over the hotel bar." "He tried," Tia said, delighted. "He really did." They laughed until the elevator gave a little sympathetic groan. When the sound died, the quiet slid deeper. The thin fabric of Tia's shirt brushed Ellen's sleeve. Heat moved, subtle and startling, like electricity testing a circuit. Tia's voice softened. "You okay with the room thing? I can sleep on the chaise if there's one. Or the floor. Or suspended from the curtain rod using 2 tote bags and a prayer. Let's assess before you reenact Cirque du Soleil." Ellen kept her tone dry to hide the tremor underneath. "I'm fine if you're fine." Tia's gaze dropped to Ellen's mouth and then higher, quick as a heartbeat. "I'm fine." A thunk rippled down the shaft, the elevator lurched, then climbed with a grudging whine. When the doors parted on 9, the hall lights flickered like a welcome that had been mugged. They gathered the bags and hustled past hushed doorways and the smell of wet carpet. The city view room did, in fact, have a spectacular window and 1 bed. The queen in question wore about 7 pillows like armor and a headboard that had pirates carved into it for reasons known only to the interior designer. Tia set the totes down, hands on hips. "Behold. Our single, glorious island." Ellen stood very still under the buzz of the storm. She had told herself a very sensible list of things since the clerk's announcement: she was here to work. She was not available, not looking, not, whatever this was. She had thought Tia was straight. Most of the women she quietly fell for were. One bed changed nothing. Except it did. It was a map drawn in the shape of a dare. Tia kicked off her shoes and padded to the window. "The river looks like a busted bracelet in the rain," she said. "Want to claim a side before sleep-deprived madness makes us territorial?" Ellen put her tote on the chair. "I don't get territorial." "Liar," Tia said cheerfully. "I watched you guard those panel microphones like a dragon. Those mics cost more than my grad degree." Tia's reflection met Ellen's in the dark glass. Left or right? Right, Ellen said, and only realized later she'd said the wrong truth. She liked the side nearest the window, where the cool sneaks in and the city hums like company. But Tia had already piled pillows into a demilitarized zone and flopped across the mattress with a sigh that made some fragile place under Ellen's ribs soften. Lightning illuminated them for an instant, two women on the edge of something neither had named. The thunder rolled over the roof. The room was warm, and the bed was one. Truce? Tia said, extending a hand across the duvet. No weirdness. We're grown-ups. We'll sleep, we'll conquer tomorrow, we'll pretend we weren't temporarily feral in a brass coffin. Ellen took her hand. Skin, soft and calloused at the base of the fingers from lifting too many crates. The shake lasted a beat too long. Truce. The power flickered again, then steadied. Somewhere below, sirens rose and fell like a tide. Ellen toed off her heels and lined them side by side, as if the neatness could hold the night in place. She didn't look at Tia when they slid under the same quilt. She didn't look when their knees accidentally aligned. She lay on her wrong side, eyes full of city light, and told herself a story about professionalism that had an end. It did not. Chapter 2. Ellen woke at 3:06 a.m. to the velvet dark of a storm-drowned city and the fact of Tia's hand across her stomach. Not possessive. Not lewd. Just a warm, sleeping bridge from Tia's side of the bed to Ellen's, where it had no business being and every right to feel like the most natural thing in the world. She didn't move. The air hum of the vent, the rain's percussion, the faint rasp of Tia's breath at the nape of her neck. The details catalogued themselves because Ellen's brain, traitorously, wanted to remember. Tia smelled like citrus shampoo and the ghost of sawdust from the vendor floor. Her fingers splayed, relaxed, across the thin cotton of Ellen's tee. Every nerve in Ellen's abdomen had opinions. You could peel her hand away, the sensible part said. You could roll, make space, return the world to two neat columns. The other part, the one that had sat shoulder to shoulder in an elevator and felt the way laughter made the small, important muscles around Tia's eyes soften, said, or you could stop pretending this doesn't exist. Tia, she whispered, because not saying the name felt like another kind of lie. The hand at her stomach went still, then lifted. Tia didn't roll away. She didn't apologize. She let her palm hover for a breath, and then she placed it back, deliberate now, not an accident at all. Ellen's inhale stuttered. We said truce. We did, Tia murmured, voice low and sleep-rough behind her ear. We didn't define the terms. The line that had kept Ellen between professional and reckless all day thinned to a piece of twine and rain. She turned slowly onto her back. Tia mirrored the movement, propped on an elbow, hair a dark halo in the lightning-laced room. I thought you were straight, Ellen said, blunt because the hour had stripped her of her fencing foil. Tia's smile was a crescent moon. That's a common misdiagnosis. I'm selectively disastrous. She searched Ellen's face. Did I misread you? Ellen's laugh came out uneven. Probably not. Silence settled, not heavy, not shy, expectant. Tia's fingers traced the hem of Ellen's sleeve, slow and careful, as if asking permission in a language that didn't use words. Ellen's hand rose of its own accord and found Tia's hip under the duvet, heat through cotton, a line drawn around the idea of wanting. There are stories you tell yourself for years, about who you are, about what keeps you safe. Then there's the story that happens in a hotel with only one bed and a storm, and that story cuts a window into the wall. Ellen's throat worked. If we start this, does it set the building on fire? Maybe, Tia said, honest and bright. But I grew up in a family that keeps an extinguisher under every sink. Ellen smiled before she could stop herself. Of course you did. Of course I did, Tia echoed, and kissed her. It wasn't cinematic. It wasn't the kind of kiss that burned cities in its reflection. It was soft and terrifying and unguarded, the exact opposite of the armor Ellen wore every morning along with her badge. Tia tasted like the contraband gummy bears she'd poured into coffee cups for the vendors at midnight. Ellen exhaled into the kiss like she'd been holding her breath since orientation week 2 jobs ago. When they parted, they didn't run the debrief. They didn't bullet point feelings. Tia tucked her forehead to Ellen's, both of them breathing like they'd had to climb a long way to arrive at something simple. "Hi," Tia said, ridiculous and necessary. "Hi," Ellen said. Outside, the storm pushed the river sideways. Inside, the room learned their names. They did not sleep much. They also did not do anything that would scandalize the housekeeping staff. They talked like teenagers drunk on the possibility of being understood, disordered families and how to read a ballroom schedule at a glance, the poetry of load-in, Ellen's single, perfect basil plant, Tia's habit of buying screwdrivers in any place she traveled, until they rattled in her suitcase like tiny, useful bones. When dawn diluted the sky, Tia drifted off at last, her hand on Ellen's shoulder now, the contact a quiet flag. Ellen watched the room go from black to gray to pale. She felt wrung out and new. At 7:15, her phone buzzed. Emergency text, keynote author delayed by weather. Can programming advice? Ellen kissed Tia's knuckles. Back to reality, she whispered. Tia's eyes opened, unfocused, then fond. I can carry reality, she said, voice foggy. You steer. Chapter 3. Reality required coffee, triage, and a small miracle. Ellen brushed her teeth twice, braided her hair with battlefield efficiency, and put on her badge lanyard like armor. Tia, a vision in a conference polo and ripped black jeans, had a headset on and 3 volunteers orbiting her like moons by 8 o'clock. They worked. There was no room for shy, just motion. Ellen rerouted rooms, swapped panelists, negotiated with a hotel AV tech who thought gain structure was a moral issue. Tia sweet-talked the freight elevator into remembering how to exist, found a backup mic, and convinced a local bakery to deliver 200 emergency croissants to the ballroom by 9. They were 2 hands on the same steering wheel, and the car did not crash. By 10:20, the replacement keynote, an indie darling with a gold tooth and a gift for talking about craft like a religion you didn't have to hate, was on stage. Ellen stood in the back beside Tia as the audience rose like a tide under the speech, laughing, sighing, making that collective sound crowds make when someone says the thing that adds vertebrae to your courage. Tia leaned close enough to be heard in the hush. So, last night. Ellen's fingers tightened on her clipboard. Yes. Are you going to pretend it didn't happen? Do you want me to? No, Tia said. No hesitation, no apology. But I'll match you if you need slow. Ellen's chest went warm in a way that wasn't panic. I don't need slow, she said. I need honest. And boundaries. And lunch. Lunch I can do. Tia's smile was small but wild. Boundaries, we'll co-author. Honest, Ellen repeated, and looked at her. The keynote ended to a roar. Ellen clapped until her palms stung and then dove back into the adrenaline river. By noon, there was a schedule. By 2, there was a crisis on the vendor floor, an indie press's shipment hadn't arrived, and Tia went to wrestle with a trucking company while Ellen babysat a talk on trope subversion with 3 panelists who'd never met the concept of a time limit. At 4, the storm broke, sunlight hitting the glass like applause. At 5, the complaint came in, a board member had concerns about conduct unbecoming reported by a volunteer who saw something. The language smelled of mold and power. Ellen read the email twice. She didn't flush. She went looking for Tia. She found her on the mezzanine, alone except for a potted ficus and a broken pop-up banner she was MacGyvering with gaffer tape. Hey, Tia said, brightening. Then she read Ellen's face. Oh. Ellen handed her the phone. Tia's smile flattened as her eyes flicked across the complaint. She whistled low. They're efficient. I don't want you hurt, Ellen said. The sentence surprised her with the speed it left her mouth. Then we make a plan, Tia said. What do they actually know? That we share a room, because the hotel overbooked. That we got stuck in an elevator. That we're good at our jobs. Ellen exhaled. And maybe that we looked at each other like the room was one bed. Tia's laugh cracked, quick and pained. Well. It was. We can switch rooms, Ellen said. Or you can. Don't you dare dignify that email by shuffling your life because a bored power broker needs to feel taller, Tia said, heat in her voice now. We owe them professionalism. We don't owe them closets. Ellen blinked. Then, slowly, she smiled. Co-authoring boundaries? Tia stepped close. Not touching. Not hiding. Boundary 1, she said. We do the job better than anyone. Boundary 2, we tell the truth if asked, because lying is bad for my skin. Boundary 3, she lowered her voice, eyes dancing, tonight, I get the window side. Ellen pretended to consider. You can have the window side. You like the window side. I do, Ellen said. I'm giving it to you. Tia's mouth curved, reverent and a little wrecked. Okay, Captain Generous. A volunteer jogged up, breathless, oblivious. Miss Fitzgerald? The horror panel ride is going great. Excellent, Ellen said. Keep all limbs inside the ride. When the volunteer ran off, Tia touched her sleeve. You're not alone, she said, simple as a screwdriver in a pocket. We handle the board. We handle the gossip. We keep the bed. Ellen nodded. The room was bright with late sun. The day hadn't won. Okay, she said. We keep the bed. Chapter 4. By evening, the storm had spent itself, leaving the city rinsed clean and humming with neon. The conference schedule was back on track, and Ellen finally let herself breathe as the last panel dismissed. She ducked into the quiet of the mezzanine, where floor-to-ceiling glass looked down on the river. Tia was already there, leaned against the rail, headset off for the first time in hours. Hey, Captain Generous. Tia's smile was crooked, tired, but warm. Survived your panel wrangling? Barely. One more question about subverting tropes and I'd have started throwing chairs. Ellen joined her, shoulder brushing the cool metal rail. For a long moment, they just looked at the river, green glass flecked with light, barges crawling past like stubborn beetles. The quiet felt like something earned. Tia broke it. The board didn't corner you, did they? Not yet. Ellen's lips quirked. They'll decide at the post-con wrap-up whether professionalism includes personal lives. Tia's expression sharpened, but she didn't lash out. Do you want to keep this quiet? Ellen hesitated. She'd spent years careful, private, folding herself small so no one could weaponize what wasn't their business. But the thing in her chest now wasn't fear, it was something stubborn. And it looked a lot like Tia. No, she said finally. I don't. Tia's hand found hers on the rail. A simple, steady press. No fireworks. Just choice. Down on the vendor floor, someone shouted about missing signage. The spell broke, but only on the edges. Dinner? Tia asked. Something greasy enough to undo today? Only if it's within a 5-block radius. Ellen smiled. I'm not braving taxis in this city at rush hour. Done. There's a place around the corner with a neon lobster that's never seen an actual lobster. Trust me. Later, after burgers and laughter and the kind of exhaustion that loosens armor, they returned to the room. The queen bed waited with its absurd pirate headboard, the pillows still piled like a fort. This time there was no truce handshake. Tia simply pulled back the duvet and patted the space beside her, eyebrows raised. Ellen toed off her shoes, heart racing, and slid in. It was easier now, not because it wasn't terrifying, but because the terror had shape. Ellen knew what she was saying yes to. She knew she didn't want to take it back. When Tia leaned in, Ellen met her halfway. The kiss was still soft, still careful, but this time it carried intent, not a question, but an answer. The storm was gone, but the room was warm, and the bed was won. Chapter 5. Morning broke with the conference in full sprint, breakfast buffets stripped bare, volunteers sprinting down hallways with clipboards, authors in glittery shoes rehearsing their panel jokes. Ellen was already in the programming office by 7, coaxing spreadsheets to behave. Tia appeared in the doorway like caffeine incarnate, 2 coffees in hand. "Peace offering," she said, setting one down by Ellen's elbow. "Black with enough sugar to rot a mortal's teeth." Ellen glanced up, smiled despite herself. "You're a menace." "Yeah, but I'm your menace," Tia shot back, casual, like she'd just dropped a match in a puddle of gasoline. Ellen swallowed a laugh that wasn't professional and definitely wasn't subtle. They hadn't talked about labels. They hadn't even figured out what they were outside the walls of room 914. But Tia said things like that, unflinching, a little reckless, and Ellen's ribs opened like blinds to the sun. By mid-morning, the board chair cornered her in the lobby. Mrs. Hardwick, pearl necklace, pursed mouth, the kind of woman who could slice volunteers in half with her critique of tone. "Ellen," she said, voice honeyed with disapproval. "Concerns have been raised." "About appearances." Ellen knew what that meant. She glanced at Tia, who was across the atrium, taping down a cord and laughing with a hotel tech. Her throat tightened. The easy answer hovered: deny, distance, preserve the peace. Instead, Ellen straightened. "Yes, I've heard. I appreciate the concern, but it doesn't affect my work. And frankly, it's not the board's business." Mrs. Hardwick's eyebrows rose. "We have an image to protect." "So do I," Ellen said, steady. "And I won't apologize for it." The older woman sniffed. "You'll find, Miss Fitzgerald, that defiance rarely." "Ellen." Tia's voice cut in, bright, unbothered. She strolled over, headset looped around her neck. "Stage B's ready. AV finally found the missing lav mic. Want to test it together before lunch?" Mrs. Hardwick looked between them, lips pinching tighter. But Ellen caught the flicker in Tia's eyes: support, not rescue. A reminder, you're not alone. "Yes," Ellen said. "Let's go." They walked away side by side. Ellen's pulse thundered, but not with shame. With relief. When they reached the service corridor, Tia nudged her shoulder. "You didn't cave." "I wanted to," Ellen admitted. "But you were right. We don't owe them closets." Tia's grin was quick, fierce. "Good. Because closets don't have pirate headboards." Ellen laughed then, the sound surprising and bright in the utilitarian hall. She wanted to kiss her right there against the industrial paint and fire exit sign. Instead, she took a breath. "You're making me reckless." "Or honest," Tia countered. "There's a difference." By the time they tested the mic, Ellen wasn't shaking anymore. By the time the keynote hit, the gossip had already begun to shift, from whispers about conduct to admiration for how the two of them had handled a crisis that could have sunk the con. When the day finally ended, they returned to the room. One bed. This time Ellen didn't hesitate. She dropped her badge on the desk, kicked off her shoes, and said, "Window side's yours." Tia's eyes softened. Boundary 3. We keep the bed. They climbed in together, no pretense, no truce, just choice. And this time, when the city lit itself in neon beyond the rain-slicked glass, Ellen kissed her first. Chapter 6. The board's final meeting was held in a sterile conference room with bad art and worse lighting. Ellen had expected judgment. She hadn't expected Tia to walk in with her head held high, conference polo traded for a sharp blazer that somehow made her look even more unstoppable. The board chair cleared her throat. "Ms. Fitzgerald, Ms. Morales. Concerns have been raised, again, about conduct and professionalism. The conference's reputation is at stake." Ellen folded her hands on the table. "The only reputation at stake is mine. And Tia's. We've delivered everything this conference needed, and more. Panels ran on time, crises were resolved, attendance hit a record. If our competence can be undone by the fact that we happen to like each other, then perhaps the problem isn't us. A ripple of discomfort spread across the table. One of the younger board members coughed, murmured, "She's right." Tia leaned forward, calm but with steel in her tone. "You asked us to save this con from falling apart. We did. You asked us to work harder than anyone else in this building. We did. Now we're asking you to let us do our jobs without pretending we're criminals for sharing a bed." The silence that followed wasn't approval, but it wasn't condemnation either. It was the sound of an old guard realizing they had less power than they thought. Mrs. Hardwick pursed her lips, but she didn't argue. Ellen and Tia left the meeting together. When the door closed behind them, Ellen's knees nearly buckled. Tia caught her arm, steady as always. "You were brilliant," Tia said. "I was terrified," Ellen admitted. "Me too." Tia's smile was soft now. "But I'd do it again. With you." They walked into the atrium where the last of the vendors were packing up. Someone cheered when they saw Ellen, another when they saw Tia, and the ripple turned into applause. Ellen blinked, startled, then realized what it meant. The people who mattered weren't whispering. They were clapping. That night, in the quiet of room 914, the bed was no longer a dare or a truce. It was a choice. They lay tangled in sheets and neon glow, laughing about tote bags and pirate headboards, planning next year's keynote as though the future was theirs to schedule. At one point, Tia propped herself on an elbow and studied Ellen's face with that ridiculous, reverent focus. "You know what I thought in that elevator? That we were doomed?" Ellen teased. "That you were the only person I wanted to be stuck with." Tia brushed a curl from Ellen's forehead. "Still do." Ellen kissed her then, slow and sure, and whispered into the space between them, "Me too." The city hummed beyond the glass, the storm gone. And inside, two women kept the bed. The end. Were you rooting for our couple in this little love story? Let me know what you think in the comments.